property.
This is my garden. Why would I step away?
I said put down the tools. Now.
Young man, I live here. I'm gardening. What exactly is the problem?
You're refusing to follow my instructions.
I'm asking for a reason. This is my home.
All right, that's it. Get on the ground.
It was 10:18 on a Saturday morning in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, when Officer Matthew Harlan made a decision so absurd, so completely indefensible, that it would end his career in law enforcement within 48 hours. The elderly woman standing in her front yard landscaping wasn't committing a crime. She was retired Judge Gloria Harper, a 73-year-old black woman who'd served on the Arizona Superior Court for 31 years before retiring 2 years ago. She was planting flowers in her own front yard. What happened in the next 11 minutes would cost Officer Matthew Harlan everything, cost the city over $600,000, and become one of the most viral police misconduct videos in internet history. Because Matthew's body camera captured every single second. Before we dive into this absolutely insane story, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to see is so outrageous, you won't believe it actually happened. Trust me on this one. Gloria Harper had lived in her house in the Arcadia neighborhood of Phoenix for 42 years. She and her late husband Leonard had bought it in 1983 when their daughter was 5 years old. Leonard had passed away 4 years ago, and Gloria lived alone now, though her daughter visited twice a week. The house was a modest ranch-style home with desert landscaping. Instead of traditional grass, the front yard featured decorative rocks, drought-resistant plants, and carefully maintained flower beds. Gloria took pride in her landscaping. It was practical for the Arizona climate and beautiful. Every Saturday morning, weather permitting, she spent 2 to 3 hours working on it. That particular Saturday, she was planting flowers. She'd bought a flat of colorful flowers from the nursery the day before, bright yellows and deep purples that would add color to the neutral desert palette. She was wearing a light blue long-sleeve shirt and comfortable pants. Her gardening tools, a small trowel, and a watering can sat on the rocks beside her. Officer Matthew Harlan was 27 years old with 4 years on the Phoenix Police Department. He'd been driving through the neighborhood on routine patrol when he saw Gloria kneeling in the yard. Something about the scene struck him as wrong. An elderly black woman in an upscale neighborhood doing yard work. Her white car was parked in the driveway behind her. In Matthew's mind, this didn't add up. He'd made assumptions about who lived in this neighborhood and who did the yard work in this neighborhood, and those assumptions were about to destroy his life. He parked his patrol car and got out. He walked up the driveway with his hand resting on his service weapon, an intimidation posture he used frequently. His body camera was recording everything. "Ma'am, put down the tools and step away from the property." Gloria looked up, confused. She'd been focused on her planting and hadn't heard the car pull up. "This is my garden. Why would I step away?" "I said, put down the tools. Now." Gloria slowly stood up, her knees protesting after kneeling for 20 minutes. She was 5'2", weighed maybe 115 pounds, and moved like someone in their 70s. Not exactly a threat. "Young man, I live here. I'm gardening. What exactly is the problem?" Matthew's mind had already categorized her. Yard worker, trespasser, possible burglar. The fact that she claimed to live there only made him more suspicious. In his experience, criminals always had excuses. "You're refusing to follow my instructions." Gloria's confusion turned to irritation. "I'm asking for a reason. This is my home." "All right, that's it. Get on the ground. Hands behind your head." The absurdity of the command didn't register with Matthew. He saw a suspect refusing to comply. He saw someone claiming ownership of property he assumed they couldn't own. He saw a situation that needed to be controlled. Gloria stared at him in disbelief. "Excuse me? I said get on the ground. Now." Quick question for you watching. Would you comply with an order like this in your own yard? Type your answer in the comments. Gloria's voice was steady but firm. "Officer, I will not get on the ground. I'm a 73-year-old woman with arthritis. I just stood up. I'm not getting back down on the ground in my own yard." Matthew moved closer, hand now gripping his weapon. "You're refusing a lawful order. That's obstruction." "It's not a lawful order. You have no reason to detain me. I'm on my own property doing yard work." A neighbor across the street, a man named Javier Montoya, had heard the raised voices and come outside. He saw what was happening and immediately pulled out his phone to record. He'd known Gloria for 15 years. She'd baked cookies for his kids. She'd written a letter of recommendation when his son applied to law school. Javier called out, "Officer, that's Judge Harper. She lives there. What are you doing?" Matthew spun toward him. "Sir, step back. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when I see my neighbor being harassed in her own yard. That's retired Judge Gloria Harper. She's lived there longer than I've been alive. Matthew ignored him. He turned back to Gloria. Final warning, get on the ground, or I will put you on the ground. Gloria's hands were shaking now, not from fear, from anger. 42 years in the legal system, 31 years as a judge, thousands of cases, hundreds of trials, and now she was being threatened with physical force in her own front yard for planting flowers. I want your badge number. I want your supervisor's name, and I want it right now. Matthew grabbed her arm. That's it. You're under arrest. Gloria tried to pull her arm away, an instinctive reaction to being grabbed. Don't you touch me. Matthew twisted her arm behind her back. Gloria cried out in pain. He forced her down toward the ground. Javier was still recording, still yelling. Stop, she's 73 years old. What are you doing? Another neighbor, a woman named Angela Whitfield, ran out of her house. Matthew, stop. That's Judge Harper. She sentenced my ex-husband in our divorce. She's a judge. Matthew had Gloria on her knees now in the rocks, trying to get her all the way to the ground. She was resisting, not because she was being combative, but because her body physically couldn't do what he was demanding. Her arthritis, her age, the sheer absurdity of being forced to lie face down in her own yard among the decorative rocks. I can't get down like that, Gloria said, her voice strained. My knees don't work that way anymore. Then you shouldn't have resisted. He pushed harder. Gloria went down onto her stomach on the rocks, crying out again as her shoulder hit the hard surface. Matthew put his knee on her back and pulled out his handcuffs. Javier was losing his mind. You're putting a 73-year-old woman on the ground in her own yard. Are you insane? Other neighbors were coming out now. Someone else was recording. Someone was calling 911 to report an officer attacking an elderly woman. Someone else was shouting Gloria's name, asking if she was okay. Matthew got one handcuff on Gloria's wrist. The metal was tight, too tight. Gloria gasped as it dug into her skin. Officer, she said, her voice strained from being pressed against the rocks. I'm a retired Superior Court judge. My identification is in my house. If you let me up, I can show you. Matthew paused, just for a second. A retired judge? The neighbor had said something about a judge. Multiple neighbors were saying it. He looked at the house. Well-maintained, expensive neighborhood. The white car in the driveway was a newer model. The landscaping was professional quality. This wasn't the home of someone doing yard work for money. He looked at Gloria on the ground beneath him, 73 years old, in a blue shirt with colorful flowers scattered around her in her own front yard. The absurdity of the situation finally penetrated his consciousness. You're a judge? Retired. Superior Court. 31 years. Angela called out from her yard. Matthew, I'm telling you, she's Judge Harper. She's famous. She was one of the toughest judges in Maricopa County. Matthew slowly removed his knee from Gloria's back. He looked at the handcuff on her wrist. He looked at the gathering crowd of neighbors. He looked at his body camera, still recording everything. He'd just handcuffed and forced to the ground a 73-year-old retired judge in her own front yard for the crime of planting flowers. I'm going to let you up, he said quietly. How generous of you, Gloria replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. He helped her to her feet. She winced as she stood, her shoulder and knees aching from where she'd hit the rocks. He removed the handcuff from her wrist. There was already a red mark forming. I apologize for the misunderstanding, Matthew said. Misunderstanding? Gloria's voice was sharp. You ordered me to the ground in my own yard. You put your hands on me. You handcuffed me. You used physical force against a 73-year-old woman who was planting flowers. That's not a misunderstanding. That's assault. Javier was still recording. Judge Harper, do you want me to call someone? Call my daughter, Gloria said, and call my attorney. This young man is going to learn that there are consequences for his actions. Do you think the officer should face criminal charges? Type yes or no in the comments. Matthew tried again. Ma'am, I was responding to what I thought might be a trespassing situation. Based on what? A 73-year-old woman planting flowers? Did you see me breaking into the house? Did you see me stealing anything? Did you have any actual reason to believe I was trespassing? Silence. You saw a black woman doing yard work in a nice neighborhood and assumed I was the help, isn't that right? More silence. Get off my property, Gloria said, and expect to hear from my attorney on Monday morning. Matthew walked back to his patrol car. His hands were shaking. The neighbors were all still watching. Multiple cameras had recorded everything. His body camera had recorded everything. He got in his car and sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. He'd assaulted a retired judge in her own yard, on camera, in front of a dozen witnesses. His career was over. He just didn't know it yet. Gloria went inside her house, her shoulder and knees still aching. She looked at the footage from her doorbell camera on her phone. It had recorded everything from a different angle. Matthew approaching. The confrontation. Gloria being forced to the ground on the rocks, the handcuffs. She saved the video. She emailed it to herself at 3 different email addresses. She uploaded it to cloud storage. Whatever happened next, the evidence was secure. Her daughter arrived 20 minutes later. When she saw the red mark on her mother's wrist and heard what happened, she started crying. Not sad tears, angry tears. "Mom, we're calling the police chief right now." "Already done," Gloria said. "I called him myself. He's sending someone over." The Phoenix Police Department's response was swift. A lieutenant arrived within the hour. He watched the body camera footage. He watched the doorbell footage. He listened to Gloria's statement. He looked at the marks on her wrist and the scrapes on her knees from the rocks. He took photographs. Then he went outside and spoke with the neighbors who'd witnessed everything. He collected their statements. He got copies of their videos. By the end of the day, every major news outlet in Phoenix had the story. "Retired judge handcuffed while planting flowers in own yard" was the headline. The body camera footage had been released to the media. By Sunday morning, it had been viewed 10 million times. The Internal Affairs investigation was opened Monday morning. The investigator was Commander Susan Donnelly, a 25-year veteran known for not tolerating nonsense from anyone, regardless of rank. She started by watching all the video footage. The body camera showed everything from Matthew's perspective: his approach, his aggressive posture, his escalating demands, Gloria's calm responses. The moment he grabbed her, the moment he forced her down onto the rocks, the handcuffs, all of it crystal clear. But there was more footage. The doorbell camera showed it from the front angle. Javier Montoya had recorded from across the street. Angela Whitfield had recorded from her yard. Another neighbor had recorded from a second-story window. Every angle showed the same thing: an officer using force against an elderly woman in her own yard with no justification. Commander Donnelly then pulled Matthew's entire service record, and what she found was troubling. Over 4 years, Matthew had generated excessive force complaints at a rate 3 times higher than the department average. He'd been involved in 7 incidents where suspects claimed he used more force than necessary. But here's what made it worse. All 7 suspects were minorities: 3 black, 2 Hispanic, 2 Asian. 0 white suspects had filed excessive force complaints against Matthew, and all 7 complaints had been marked insufficient evidence or no misconduct found. Each incident had been reviewed in isolation. Each time, Matthew's version of events had been accepted. Each time, the complaint had been dismissed. Commander Donnelly didn't just read the reports. She pulled the body camera footage that accompanied each incident, footage that had been reviewed by the initial investigators but apparently not scrutinized carefully enough. One incident from 2 years earlier involved a Hispanic teenager skateboarding in a shopping center parking lot. Matthew's report said the teen had been aggressive and threatening, requiring physical intervention. The body camera footage told a different story. The teen was riding away when Matthew grabbed him from behind and slammed him to the ground. The teen suffered a broken arm and a concussion. The complaint was dismissed because Matthew's report claimed the teen had turned toward him aggressively. The footage showed no such thing. Another incident from 18 months ago involved a black man pulled over for a broken taillight. Matthew's report said the man reached toward the center console, forcing Matthew to deploy pepper spray for officer safety. The body camera footage showed the man's hands on the steering wheel the entire time. He never moved them. He was pepper sprayed while sitting completely still. The complaint was dismissed because Matthew claimed he saw furtive movement. The footage contradicted this claim entirely. A third incident involved an Asian college student stopped while walking home from campus at night. Matthew's report said the student matched the description of a burglary suspect and became belligerent during questioning. The body camera showed a confused, polite student asking why he was being stopped. Matthew never articulated what description he matched. The student was detained for 40 minutes before being released with a warning for suspicious behavior. The complaint was dismissed as no misconduct found. Commander Donnelly cataloged every incident. She created a timeline. She documented the pattern that should have been obvious years ago if anyone had been looking. She also pulled Matthew's training records. He'd attended de-escalation training twice. He'd passed the tests with acceptable scores. But his real-world behavior showed no evidence he'd absorbed any of it. His first instinct was always force. His first response was always control. His interactions showed no attempt to assess situations or consider alternatives. The pattern was undeniable. Matthew used excessive force. He used it disproportionately against minorities. He justified it with false or exaggerated claims. And he'd been getting away with it because each incident was reviewed in isolation, without anyone connecting the dots. Commander Donnelly's report was 63 pages long. Her conclusion: Officer Matthew Harlan demonstrates a pattern of excessive force, racial bias in enforcement, and a fundamental failure to understand appropriate use of force. His assault on retired Judge Harper represents not an aberration but the predictable result of years of unchecked misconduct. Her recommendation: immediate termination and referral to the county attorney for possible criminal charges. Matthew was fired within 48 hours of the incident, the fastest termination in Phoenix Police Department history. But the consequences didn't stop there. The county attorney reviewed the case and decided to file charges. Criminal charges. Matthew was charged with assault, unlawful restraint, and violation of civil rights under Arizona law. He was arrested, booked, and released on bond. Gloria filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. She didn't need the money. Her judicial pension was generous, her house was paid off, she was financially secure, but she wanted accountability. She wanted a public record. She wanted to make sure this couldn't happen to someone else. The lawsuit alleged assault, battery, false arrest, violation of constitutional rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It named Matthew Harlan personally and the city of Phoenix. The city's attorneys looked at the evidence: body camera footage showing everything from Matthew's perspective, doorbell camera footage from another angle, a dozen neighbor witnesses, cell phone videos from multiple angles, a victim who was a retired judge with impeccable credibility, an officer with a pattern of excessive force. They settled in 6 weeks, $620,000, plus mandatory comprehensive reforms that went far beyond the typical settlement language. The reforms included complete revision of use of force policies with input from civil rights organizations, mandatory de-escalation training for all officers with quarterly refresher courses, quarterly reviews of all force incidents to identify patterns by individual officer, creation of an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power and full access to body camera footage, an automatic referral to the county attorney for any officer with 3 or more excessive force complaints within a 2-year period. The settlement also required something unprecedented in Arizona law enforcement. The Phoenix Police Department had to publicly release detailed data on all excessive force complaints from the previous 5 years. Not just summary statistics, full data, officer names, complaint details, investigation outcomes, race of subjects, everything, broken down by officer and by race of the subject. No more hiding patterns behind insufficient evidence determinations. No more dismissing complaints in isolation without examining whether they were part of a larger pattern. Complete transparency. The settlement required the city to hire an independent monitor to review the implementation of all reforms. The monitor would have full access to department records and would report publicly every 6 months on compliance. If compliance was inadequate, the court could impose additional penalties. And here's the kicker. The settlement required that all of this remain in effect for 10 years, not 2 years, not 5 years, 10 full years of oversight, transparency, and accountability. The city initially resisted the 10-year provision. Their attorneys argued it was excessive. Gloria's response was simple. Officer Harlan got away with excessive force for 4 years because no one was watching. 4 years of hurting people, 4 years of violations. 10 years of oversight seems more than fair. The city accepted the terms. If you think this settlement was justified, type justice in the comments. The settlement press conference was covered by every media outlet in Arizona and many national outlets. Gloria stood at the podium, her wrists still showing faint marks from the handcuff. I'm a 73-year-old woman who served this community for 31 years as a judge. I dedicated my career to justice and fairness. And I was assaulted in my own front yard by a police officer who saw me planting flowers and decided I was a criminal. Not because I did anything wrong, but because he looked at my face and made assumptions about who belongs in that neighborhood and who doesn't. She paused, looking directly at the cameras. I'm fortunate. I'm a retired judge. I know the law. I know my rights. I had neighbors who stood up for me. I had cameras that recorded everything. But what about everyone else? What about the people who don't have those advantages? How many people has Officer Harlan hurt who didn't have the resources to fight back? Those are the people I'm thinking about. That's why this case matters. The press conference went viral. The video of Gloria's statement was viewed 20 million times in the first week, 40 million times within the first month. People were outraged. An elderly woman planting flowers in her own yard, forced to the ground on rocks, handcuffed by a police officer who decided she looked suspicious. The comment sections exploded. People shared their own stories of being assumed not to belong in their own neighborhoods, their own homes, their own lives. Black Americans shared stories of being questioned about what they were doing in their own yards, their own driveways, their own communities, often with the assumption they were service workers or didn't belong. Asian Americans shared stories of being assumed to be workers or delivery people, even when they owned the businesses or homes. Hispanic Americans shared stories of being asked for identification while walking their own streets, entering their own homes, living their own lives. The hashtag #GardeningWhileBlack trended worldwide for 3 days. People posted photos of themselves gardening with captions like, "Officer, I own this house," and "Yes, this is my yard." The irony and anger were palpable, but the impact went beyond social media. The body camera footage was picked up by every major news network. CNN ran a special segment. MSNBC interviewed Gloria. CBS News did a feature on racial profiling in affluent neighborhoods. The story resonated because it was so absurd and yet so recognizable. Civil rights organizations used Gloria's case as a rallying point. The ACLU launched a nationwide initiative documenting similar incidents. They created a database where people could report being questioned or detained in their own homes or neighborhoods. Within 6 months, they had over 8,000 reports. The patterns were undeniable and disturbing. Law enforcement organizations had mixed reactions. Some condemned Matthew's actions as inexcusable. Others tried to defend him, arguing he'd made a judgment call. But those defenses crumbled when the pattern of his previous conduct became public. This wasn't one mistake. This was systemic misconduct. The comment sections were predictable in some ways. Some people defended Matthew, saying he was just trying to protect the neighborhood. Others pointed out that he'd assaulted an elderly woman for planting flowers. But overwhelmingly, people recognized the absurdity and the underlying racism of assuming a black woman couldn't own a home in that neighborhood. The criminal case against Matthew went to trial 9 months later. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 18 months in jail, 3 years of probation, and permanent prohibition from working in law enforcement anywhere in Arizona. He served 11 months of his sentence before being released on good behavior. When he got out, he tried to find work, any work, but his name was now permanently linked to the viral video of him forcing a 73-year-old retired judge to the ground in her own yard for planting flowers. No one would hire him. He applied to over 40 jobs in 6 months, construction companies, delivery services, retail stores. Everyone rejected him. Some specifically cited the incident. Others just said they'd gone with other candidates. He eventually moved out of state, changing his name legally to escape the association. Last anyone heard, he was working night shifts at a warehouse in Nevada, making $14 an hour. His wife divorced him while he was in jail. His parents stopped speaking to him. His former friends wouldn't return his calls. The viral video had destroyed every relationship in his life. He tells himself he was just doing his job, that he made a judgment call, that it was an honest mistake. But late at night, alone in his apartment, he knows the truth. He saw a black woman doing yard work in an affluent neighborhood and assumed she was the help or a trespasser. He saw someone he thought didn't belong, and he decided to assert his authority, and it cost him everything. Gloria still lives in the same house. She still gardens every Saturday morning when the weather permits. She planted those colorful flowers that same afternoon after Matthew left. They bloomed beautifully that spring and summer, bright yellows and deep purples adding color to her desert landscaping. She gets recognized sometimes now. People see her in the grocery store or at the nursery and say, "You're Judge Harper from that video." Most are supportive. Some share their own stories. A few thank her for standing up. The body camera footage is now used in police training academies across 42 states. It's shown as the definitive example of what not to do, how assumptions based on race and age can lead to catastrophic decisions, how failure to assess a situation properly can destroy a career. The Phoenix Police Department implemented all the required reforms. The excessive force data was made public on a dedicated website. The patterns that emerged were shocking but not surprising to anyone who'd been paying attention. The data showed that over the previous 5 years, minority residents were subjected to force at rates nearly 4 times higher than white residents in similar circumstances. When controlled for the severity of the alleged offense, the disparities were even more stark. For minor offenses like traffic violations or misdemeanors, minorities were 8 times more likely to experience force. The data also revealed problem officers. 15 officers accounted for 43% of all excessive force complaints. These 15 officers had been flagged internally multiple times, But no comprehensive action had been taken because, like Matthew, each incident had been reviewed in isolation. Once the patterns were visible, once there was accountability, things began to change. The 15 officers with the highest complaint rates were all placed under intensive review. 3 were terminated within the first 6 months, 4 were demoted, 5 were moved to desk assignments pending additional investigation, 3 received final warnings and mandatory retraining. But beyond individual accountability, the culture started to shift. Officers knew they were being watched. They knew their use of force statistics would be analyzed quarterly. They knew patterns would be identified and addressed. And the incidents decreased. Not overnight, not completely, but measurably and consistently. In the first year after the settlement, use of force incidents decreased by 32%. In the second year, they decreased by another 18%. The racial disparities narrowed, though they didn't disappear entirely. Progress, not perfection, but real, documented progress. 3 other officers were terminated in the 18 months following the release of the data. All 3 had patterns similar to Matthew's: excessive force, racial disparities, incidents that had been dismissed individually but looked very different when viewed as a pattern. Gloria wrote an op-ed for the New York Times titled, "I Was Gardening While Black." It went viral in its own right. She wrote about the assumptions people make about who belongs where, about how she'd spent her entire judicial career trying to ensure equal treatment under the law, only to be assaulted in her own yard by someone who saw her race and made assumptions. She became an advocate for police reform. She testified before the Arizona legislature in support of use of force legislation. She spoke at community forums about bias and accountability. She never wanted to be an activist, but the incident changed her perspective on what needed to change. The flowers from that Saturday morning bloomed all season. Gloria maintained them carefully, watering them in the early mornings before the Arizona heat became intense. Every time she worked in her yard, she thought about that day, about the absurdity, about the injustice, and about the changes that followed. One Saturday morning, 11 minutes, a police officer who saw a 73-year-old black woman planting flowers and decided she was a criminal, and a retired judge who refused to let injustice go unanswered. If this story made you think about the assumptions we make every day, share it. Hit subscribe for more stories about accountability. And drop a comment. Have you ever been assumed not to belong somewhere you absolutely belonged? Tell your story. See you in the next one.